This was very, very difficult for Carol. But before she reluctantly brought out this golden ring from her fingers, she picked also her husband's ring, put them together, and got a rope and tied this ring 7 times. And each time she was tying the ring, she made some prayers while tying this ring 7 times. And then crying, she gave the ring to her husband. And her husband told her to trust. And her husband told her to trust him, that nothing bad is going to come out of this. And if anything bad is going to come out from this, let it affect him and not her or the kids. And then the husband called one of his siblings who walked up, and he gave this ring to the sibling. And before the sibling moved, he turned her back and told the man that you have to come with me to this sacrifice. But the man said he doesn't want to go. Go ahead, I want to stay with my wife. His sibling went down. And after a few minutes, 3 men walked up into the room and called him and told him that you have to join us. This was his uncles. And at this point, he had no option but to follow them. He went ahead in the middle of the night while Carol was down in the bed, feeling very gloomy about this whole thing. She didn't like it, but her husband went ahead. Carol went back to bed, and she barely slept when she heard her son scream her name downstairs. Immediately she woke up, put on her hijab, and ran downstairs. When she got downstairs, she was very, very surprised to see her husband, who left home looking very healthy, but now looking almost lifeless. Her husband was being carried in by 2 uncles. He has his hands over their shoulders. He can barely walk. They brought him in and sat him on the chair. She was very surprised and asked what happened. None of them said anything. She also went as far as telling them, why would you bring him in? Let's take him to the hospital immediately. The uncles denied that access, and she insisted, and after much persuasion, they agreed to take this man to the hospital. Right now, the man was not able to say anything because he was almost lifeless. They took him to the hospital. In the hospital, the doctor quickly ran a lot of tests, did a lot of examinations, and came back with the news. He said he saw nothing medically wrong with this man, that there is nothing he could pinpoint that is causing the actual problem right now. At the same time, Carol started feeling flushed and dizzy. She started feeling sick, which to her was very mysterious, that her husband is sick and now she's sick as well. And to make matters worse, the uncles who were with him before he got this bad wouldn't give her any response as to what was happening to her husband or what led to what was happening to her husband. Her husband, who at this time was very weak, was able to make a gesture and called Carol. When Carol came close, she realized that her husband's eye has already started turning gray, and his tongue was very black, and his skin was grayish. She felt like her husband's blood was being sucked from somewhere, but not physically seen. And her husband told her something. He said, in case anything happens to me, make sure you take my kids far away from my family. And if my uncles bring back the wedding ring that we gave to them, don't touch it. And Carol, crying, told her husband, nothing is going to happen to you. And then she left to go pay some medical bills. When she came back, she was surprised to see an empty hospital bed. And immediately she ran to the doctor, who didn't say much but points towards the exit of the hospital and told the woman that this is above his league, that he didn't take any decision, but he should go with the uncles and do whatever they want to do, that this is not his own decision, they can do whatever they want to do. Then this woman was very, very confused to hear that, and she ran out immediately, and behold, her husband is being taken into a car. And she was like, why would you take my husband out of the hospital where he is supposed to get a medical attention. But before the uncles could say anything, the man took his last breath. Of course, Carol would cry as expected for every woman. And then comes the burial. And after the burial, a few days later, the uncles walked up to Carol and family. He has a son who is at this point 12 years old. His name is Muhammad. And they told Carol that before her husband died, that he was performing a ritual. And this ritual was not completely done. That her son, Muhammad, is supposed to carry out this ritual in completion. At this point, Carol was ready to go against anything. She stood up and said, "No way would my son participate in this. For sure, I don't even know what happened to my husband and now my son." The man walked out, and then the son started narrating a story that Carol never knew. The son who walked out with his dad at the night when this sacrifice was performed said that the wedding rings that they gave to the uncles was actually inserted in the mouth of the goat. And after inserting these rings in the mouth of the goat, they gave her husband a knife to stab the goat to death, which obviously was done. And Carol was very shocked to hear this for the first time. And while the son was still narrating the story, one of the uncles walked in with the ring and asked her to take her rings back. She, of course, said no, that she is not going to take the rings back because her husband ordered her before he died not to touch the rings. That was when Carol started making plans to leave Guinea. But before then, they already confiscated everything the man has, the house, his properties, cars and everything, and also instructed Carol that he is supposed to marry one of the man's siblings based on the culture. Carol wouldn't take this and quickly planned for her exit. Carol successfully escaped Guinea back to Kenya. And of note, the uncle who claimed that he was going to sacrifice himself instead of anybody is still alive till today. What do you think happened here? This one is hard. Now, do you think that Carol should have listened to her husband? Because her husband never wanted to travel to Guinea. He has always been trying to stay away from the home. And do you also think that Carol should have allowed her husband, or should have denied her husband the access to do the cultural practices, if it's really a culture? Or do you think the husband was actually spiritually duped by the uncles? What really happened here? But the most important thing we have to understand is, before ever you try to get married to anybody, especially in Africa, they are deep in culture. You really have to understand what is acceptable to you and understand the actual things that goes on religiously, spiritually, culturally, or whatever you call it, before you dive into any relationship. You be the judge.